Today we're going to talk about one of the most complex characters Pokemon has ever made. What's going on, all you beautiful savages out there? So today I want to talk about one of the most interesting, complex, most human, and my personal favorite character that Pokemon has ever created. And special shout out to Mimic Brew. He made a video a while back talking about the story of N. And ever since I heard that story, I was obsessed. He instantly became my favorite character. I felt like I could immediately connect with him. So I'm hoping this video will do the same and reach somebody that doesn't know the story and bring them to the light. If you've heard the story, then you know. If you know, you know. And if you haven't heard the story, then you're gonna learn today. So his name is N. But his full name is Natural Harmonia Gropius, which sounds pretty intense. Like, it just sounds like he was just meant to be important. Like, he's just legendary. Like, he was just destined for something. But one of the things with N is this. He doesn't really fit in the category with all your other typical characters and trainers. He's not a hero. He's not really a villain. He's somewhere in between. And his story is actually surprisingly deep for a Pokemon game. But to understand N, we need to start from the beginning. And his beginning is honestly pretty sad. Imagine this for a second. A small child, completely alone, deep in the woods. No home, no family, no one to protect him. That's where N's story starts. He was abandoned when he was very young. Now, we don't really know exactly what happened, but what we do know is he was left alone out in nature with nothing. Normally, a child in that situation wouldn't survive. But something strange happened. Instead of dying out there, like probably what was meant to happen, the Pokemon that were living in that area saw him and took care of him. They protected him. They lived alongside him. And over time, N began to grow up around all these Pokemon. Now think about that for a second. Your entire childhood was spent around Pokemon instead of humans. Your view of the world would be completely different. And that's what happened to N. He didn't grow up learning how trainers and Pokemon usually react. He didn't grow up seeing gym battles or trainers traveling with their partners. He saw Pokemon as equals, friends, family. And because of that, something very unusual developed. N can actually understand Pokemon. Like when you hear Pika Pika, he's like, oh, all right, bet. Not just commands, not just body language. Like, he can actually understand their emotions and their voices, just like they were speaking directly to him. And that ability would shape his entire life. But eventually someone found him, and that moment would change everything. Because the person that found him was one of the most dangerous men in the entire Pokemon world. A man who would completely reshape N's understanding of reality. And that man's name was Ghetsis. Ghetsis was a powerful leader within an organization called Team Plasma. And when he discovered N in the woods, he immediately noticed something special. He knew, like, this wasn't just a normal child. He saw that N could talk to Pokemon. He also noticed that N had intelligence far beyond his age. N was a genius. N also had a pure heart. And Ghetsis saw that. And when Ghetsis realized all of this within this little child, he realized that N was the perfect tool. So he adopted him. He swooped him up, not because he was, wanted to take care of this child that was abandoned out in the woods. He was he was something else, I'll tell you what. But he did this all for one goal, and one plan only. Ghetsis had a plan, a very calculated plan, because if he wanted to control the world, what better symbol could you use than someone that can speak for Pokemon themselves? Now this is where N's story starts to become a little darker, because once Ghetsis brought N in, he didn't raise him like a normal child. He isolated him. N grew up inside of a castle, completely isolated from society, away from regular trainers, away from seeing how most people interact with their Pokemon. And here's the most important detail. Ghetsis carefully controlled what N was allowed to see. He only exposed N to abused Pokemon. Pokemon that have been mistreated, Pokemon that have been abandoned, Pokemon that have been hurt by trainers just over and over again. That's all N saw. That was N's entire world, And when you see that growing up, you start to believe something. You start to believe that humans and Pokemon should not be together. You start to believe that humans are cruel, and that Pokemon are suffering, and that someone needs to save them. And that's exactly what N began to believe. Here's the thing that makes this story so tragic. N wasn't lying. He wasn't pretending. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. And that's why Ghetsis chose him. As N got older, he became the central figure of Team Plasma. He was the face. They even gave him a title. They called him King of Team Plasma. And the idea behind that title was powerful, because if someone who can actually talk to Pokemon said something, people would listen. And N's message was simple. Pokemon should be liberated. No more trainers, no more battles, no more Pokeballs. Just Pokemon living freely in nature. Now, when you hear that, it almost sounds noble. Like he's actually doing the right thing. And that's what makes N such a interesting character. He's not power hungry. He's not cruel. He's idealistic. Almost painfully idealistic. But there was one problem. His entire belief system was built on a lie. And the person that would slowly start to break that lie is you. If you play the games. You run into N multiple times. And every time you meet him, he challenges you to a battle. But here's the interesting thing. Every time he battles you, he's not battling you to win. He's battling you to test his beliefs. Because every time he fights you, he observes something. Your Pokemon trust you. They fight beside you willingly. They don't look abused. They don't look enslaved. They look like they actually care about you. And that starts to confuse N, because it contradicts everything he was taught. And slowly, you can see doubt starting to form in his mind. But before N can fully question his beliefs, something massive happens. Something that pushes his ideals to the absolute limit. The awakening of the legendary dragon. So, at the climax of the story, N awakens one of the legendary dragons of the Unova region. So, depending on whatever game you play, black or white, it's either Zekrom or Reshiram. Now, a lot of people don't realize, but these Pokemon represent powerful concepts, truth, and ideals. And when the dragon chooses N, it feels like confirmation for him. Like destiny itself is validating his beliefs. And in that moment, N truly believes he is the one meant to change the world. Then he challenges you one final time to prove whose beliefs are stronger. So, as you can guess, the battle doesn't go the way N expected it to go. Because after everything he believed, everything he fought for, the truth finally comes out, and it destroys everything. So, after the final battle, Ghetsis reveals his true plan, and it is honestly one of the darkest twists in Pokemon. I'm sure you can guess, but he never cared about liberating Pokemon. Not even a little. The entire movement was just manipulation. If everyone released their Pokemon, then Ghetsis would be the only person left with Pokemon. And that would give him complete control. World dominance. That was always the goal. And poor N, just had his entire life shattered. This kid, he was abandoned in the woods and survived. He just cares, he cares about Pokemon. He's manipulated his entire life completely. He shapes his mind one way, just completely just shatters him. He grew up thinking and believing one thing, not seeing the entire picture, and just having his life shattered like that. It's truly just a sad story. N was just the face of the movement, a puppet, only a symbol to convince people. And when N hears this, everything breaks. Like the man who raised him, the man he trusted, was just lying to him his entire life. But strangely, that moment of betrayal is the moment that N finally begins to understand the world. For the first time, N sees the full picture. Not just abused Pokemon, not just cruelty, but also friendship, partnership, and trust. The bond between trainers and Pokemon. And he realizes something. The world isn't as simple as he thought. Some trainers are cruel, but many trainers genuinely love their Pokemon, and the relationship between them can be beautiful. That realization just completely changes him. After everything that happened, N doesn't stay behind. He doesn't try to rebuild Team Plasma. He doesn't stay to become champion. Instead, he leaves. He rides away on the back of his legendary dragon, like a badass, to travel the world, to see things with his own eyes, to figure out what he truly believes. And honestly, that ending fits his character perfectly. Because N was never meant to rule anything, He was meant to learn. And that's why N is one of the most interesting characters Pokemon has ever written. He's not evil, he's not greedy, he's not trying to conquer the world. He's just someone with a pure heart that was manipulated by someone that was pure evil. And when he finally learned the truth, he chose to walk his own path. And honestly, that is a pretty powerful story for a Pokemon game. That's something a lot of people can learn from in their daily life. And that is why N is my favorite trainer. With a character that deep, I'm still going back to watch old shows and movies that, of the whole Unova region, just because how interesting that character is. And I'm just wondering what else is going on in that story. So I'm a huge fan. Now, when they remake the games, a new Black and White, because we all know that they are. That is such a great story. How can they not? One of the best games ever. Most people say the Black and White games are the best Pokemon games that they've made. So by the time that they remake those games, Black Bolt, White Flare, those are going to take off. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope I told it well. Most importantly, I appreciate you for listening. Hit that subscribe and join the crew. I appreciate you all for hanging out. You are all beautiful savages. I'm Bondiggle, and I'll see you on the next one.